No, first of all, we are doing this for her, okay? Because neither one of us wants to get divorced. And secondly, I know you're the big marriage expert. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Your wife is dead. I'm sorry, that was 100% inappropriate, and I do apologize profusely. Oh.
Now, I was gonna say well-known, but I feel like that would be inaccurate. You know, I was sitting in my classroom recently, and some parents were touring the school. They mentioned their kid's YouTube channel, and their 10-year-old had more subscribers than me. That was a sobering experience. As an unknown contrarian, there are two possible routes I could go down in this intro. I could say I love Zack Snyder, which is contrarian, or I could say I hate his movies, which is also contrarian. It's a whole bag of worms. Is that a saying? I'm still really caught up on the 10-year-old. I'm going to have to disappoint the Snyder heads. I don't like Zack Snyder movies. I think they can range from interesting but bad to just awful. But if there's one thing I'll praise Mr. Snyder for, it's his taste in movies. He enjoyed one of my favorite movies so much, he remade it, Dawn of the Dead. The original is an amazing critique of consumerism and the human condition in times of crisis, with some fantastic moments.
You never know.
Money, money, money.
And an approach to the zombie subgenre that still feels refreshing and intriguing 45 years later. The remake is the worst remake of a movie I've ever seen. This is my Disney live-action remake, stripping it of all of its charm and turning it into some weird jump scare fest. Ah, it's a child. That's literally a fucking door. It's a shopping center, not a fucking psychiatric ward. What is up with the fucking music? Throwing a toilet through a window isn't scary. Sure, it may give me a fucking 5-second free trial of cardiac arrest, but it isn't nearly as scary as watching a man slowly lose his mind from a zombie bite. It stripped away all of the interesting characters of the original, which had a small but effective dynamic that proves you don't need a huge cast to make a good movie, and replaced them with a rich cast of characters including, but not limited to, Anna, Kenneth, Michael, CJ, Terry, Nicole, Andre, Luda, Steve, Bart, Norma, Tucker, Glenn, Monica, and Andy. That is 15 if we want to count people who actually get to the shopping center, it's around 17, or 19 if we want to count Anna's boyfriend and Anna's work friend, neither of which are ever brought up again after their scenes. They are still introducing major characters a third of the way into the movie. You know what would have been a good idea? Just combining some characters. You know, some characters can do more than one thing, especially when you only have one to make fun of gay people. For some reason, this character is in the movie. All of the interesting political commentary has also been stripped away to make some weird pro-isolationist narrative.
If we start letting people in here, and we're gonna let the wrong ones in, and then I'm dead. And you know what? I don't want to die.
It took a story about teamwork and friendship in the face of insurmountable odds and made it anti-immigration. Zack Snyder fucked with one of the best zombie movies of all time, and I'll never forgive him for that. So let's talk about a Zack Snyder zombie movie. Hello, Sir Never Give Up heads. Now this may make me seem rather biased. Sir Never Give Up, how can you review a movie by a director you seem to adamantly hate? Well, Army of the Dead was actually my first Zack Snyder movie, unless you count the original cut of Justice League, which I sincerely hope you don't.
People are difficult. They require a lot of focus. They have like a rhythm that I haven't quite been able to.
But I had a lot of my thoughts on this movie before I had even watched the original Dawn of the Dead. First and foremost, the worst thing about this movie is how visually stunning it is. Something that Zack Snyder can be very good at, and also very bad at. Sucker Punch is such a bad movie. It's like his worst one. And this is coming from someone who thought 300 was also pretty bad. But like, seriously, this movie has no right being this well shot, at least when you can see it. Like, what's up with the focus? I get that you bought these nice lenses on Amazon, but you don't have to use them for every shot. Like, sure, it's a quaint filming technique. You could have made an action set piece that uses it. I wouldn't object, but maybe not a scene of a man helping an old woman float in a swimming pool. It's kind of useless here and lessens the impact the shallow focus definitely could have had. Like, there are shots where it's really well used and displays the emotional state of the characters, and that's entirely ruined by it being used for every single shot. So in that sense, it is also kind of inconsistent in how well shot it is, but I have to say it is generally a quite impressive looking movie. Army of the Dead is a zombie movie, but it's not just any zombie movie, it's a zombie heist movie. We'll get to that part. Okay, I'm not making a synopsis, at least not yet. If you want to know what the movie's about, like, go watch it. Or don't, it's not really required reading, and this video is a whole hour and a half shorter. But it might be better to be safe than sorry. If you want to watch it, like, be my guest. Apparently this movie has been on and off in development, or more precisely being written, for around 14 years. After being in development hell for a long time and then being cancelled in 2012, it went from a Warner Brothers production to a Netflix original, and took the wonderful shape it's currently in. It is intended to be the beginning of, you guessed it, a cinematic universe. So that's gonna be fun for me. After hearing all that, it sounds like the movie will have a great and focused story without any redundant indulgences.
We should need money. Open a restaurant, a new food truck. Just have a life. I was thinking artisan grilled cheese sandwiches.
Artisan grilled cheese?
What is this fucking music? What is this ninja zombie shit? And then there's this fucking zombie tiger.
It's a goddamn zombie tiger.
We're not 5 years old. We know what a tiger is. I mean, the tiger looks cool. I wish it was used for anything other than establishing shots. And then once it actually does something, it kills one person, and the death is so bad they couldn't even be bothered to edit out the wire that thrashes the guy around. It's a bad movie. Of course, continuity errors are really only funny. It's not a big deal that they forgot to edit out a wire. But a lot of the problems with the Dawn of the Dead remake carry over into this movie, but tenfold. Army of the Dead doesn't have the stellar foundation of the original because it's a different movie. Army of the Dead is the base for a future universe. While I wouldn't go as far as to call it foreshadowing the future of the Snyderverse, it definitely is ominous to have the fucking artisan grilled cheese movie as a base. This movie seems so weirdly obsessed with its lore. There's robot zombies littered throughout, and Zack Snyder hinted it might be some government spying technology or some other shit I don't care about. Mr. Snyder, maybe focus on making the plot of your current movie good as opposed to setting up other future movies. If you have extra runtime to burn, then you can add in the foreshadowing, but as it stands, Army of the Dead would probably still be stretched thin if you gave it another half hour. And for all you CinemaSins fans, there's some logical mistakes throughout, such as a man walking through a nuclear wasteland and being completely unaffected, or like how, for some reason, despite very clearly seeing its helmet, all of the characters refuse to shoot anywhere else on this zombie's body other than its head. It also isn't very good from a writing standpoint. Here's a lesson in foreshadowing. Don't write something in such a way that it sounds like it's going to come back up when it definitely isn't.
There they are. They're shamblers. What's left of them.
Weren't smart enough to get out of the sun. You should see what happens when it rains. For a few hours, they'll come back to life.
It doesn't rain the entire movie. This is likely a consequence of its status as part of a cinematic universe. I'm sure this will have a good payoff in 3 to 4 movies and a series of television, but it seems kind of pointless to mention at the moment. Honestly, I don't think people who like this movie care about plot holes, because I don't care either. I don't think I've ever really been pulled out of a movie by plot holes, because usually I'm just too focused on how fucking metal it is that he walks through a nuclear wasteland. Although it's fun to point out plot holes, Army of the Dead doesn't really lean on any contrivances. It doesn't really lean on anything. The movie is surprisingly empty for 2.5 hours long. Some scenes just drag on for like way too long. Vandero goes on this whole big speech about time loops that has no relevance.
Oh, look.
There's another team of grave robbers. They tried to cut their way in. That's so stupid. Huh, you stupid, poor skeletons?
Is it another team or is it us, Dieter? I mean, look at them. It's us. It could be us in another timeline. And we're caught in some infinite loop, fighting and dying, fighting and dying. And Tanaka, devil, God, and we, you, me, Goose, and the rest of the team, simply pawns in some perverse play where we're destined to repeat our failures.
I'm like 90% sure that this was like a pretentious way to comment on human greed that just got so muddled it doesn't make sense. Or scenes that are paced in an incredibly weird way. There's a conversation between Scott and his daughter that I was convinced was like 7 minutes long. It was 3.
I mean, maybe there's a chance we could still...
Still what?
And then there's scenes that are either weirdly written or weirdly edited.
My apologies. How precisely do we do the zombie killing?
Oh, Jesus. Well, we all know the basics. Zombies, shamblers, the undead, whatever you want to call them. When it comes to killing them, it's all about the brain. If one comes at you, shoot it in the brain. It's that simple.
You know, usually when someone says, you know the basics, that means they're going to explain something more complicated afterwards. Not just finish the sentence.
Oh, shattered sky and boiling sea, is a ruined world our gift to thee. Got 1,000 miles of heavy trials just waiting in the wind for me. With a howling storm and a raging fire, I'll see it through this fool desire. It's a hope that feeds this funeral pyre, but I bury it in my hand. The hammer come down with a heady sound, and the hammer come down with a heady sound, and the hammer come down with a heady sound. Wander, oh wander, no reason to stay. Go yonder, your fears cast away. A home of breath and bone, so they say.
Now, I don't think I have moral superiority over this film. I have so many things I could be talking about, I cannot explain for the life of me why I care about this goddamn movie so much. Obviously, every video needs a beginning. I mean, it's gonna be in a numbered list, obviously. There's gonna be fun little titles for each section. Oh, I'll just fucking steal it from the documentary.
Okay, good.
Zack Snyder is no short, the student of zombie movies.
He's very aware of how to elevate, you know, how to make it real life.
I live my life in full honor. We got it.
This is deep zombie storytelling.
There, that works. Boom. Deep zombie storytelling. Let's fucking talk about that. The king zombie, Zeus, has a queen, just called Queen. They couldn't think of a name for her. They have a baby together, a plot point that is weirdly similar to one in the Dawn of the Dead remake. Well, this time they're actually expecting until Queen gets her fucking head cut off, and then it's a little fetus thing. I don't know why this is in the movie, it feels weird. I mean, how did he know she was pregnant? Do these zombies have periods to miss? How would a zombie know that fact? Zeus seems like a smart guy. Wouldn't he have doubts about the viability of a rotting womb for giving birth? Or would a rotting womb be more viable for producing a zombie child? Don't pregnant women eat a whole lot more? It's kind of fucked up that he makes her go get the food, takes a bite, and then gives it to some other fucking guys as opposed to his pregnant wife. This plot point opens up a lot of questions. In actuality, I don't just find the implication that these two zombies have an active sex life to be the most important part of these scenes. What really gets me is the grief felt by Zeus following the death of his wife. The movie has a rather interesting concept. Zombinis who feel human emotion. I tried to get through that with a straight face.
What are you talking about? They don't think. If they come, we kill them. You don't understand. They're not what you think they are.
Shoot her in the face!
There's another evolution that happens with zombies where this idea of what we would become if the zombie plague made us stronger as opposed to decomposing.
I've never seen a movie that goes into the essence of zombies in this way.
I think the idea of zombies having human emotions is a vaguely interesting idea. I mean, the original Dawn of the Dead had a similar concept. They are reenacting things they did when they were alive, which also forms the base of its consumerist criticism.
What are they doing? Why did they come here?
Some kind of instinct, memory of what they used to do. This was an important place in their lives.
Except in Dawn of the Dead, they're a lot more explicitly tragic. They're barely functional and lack coordination. It plays a lot on cosmic horror as well. The idea that once we're dead, we can become these mindless flesh puppets, as Dawn of the Dead calls them motorized instinct, is inherently horrifying.
There are reports of these creatures using tools, but even these actions are the most primitive. The use of external articles as bludgeons and so forth. These creatures are nothing but pure, motorized instinct.
The audience is meant to feel sympathy for these zombies. But the main problem around the concept in Army of the Dead is that despite writing these zombies with human emotions, they were not designed to be characters. They were first and foremost a threat, like how zombies are usually treated. But it creates a sort of tonal dissonance, where in one scene we're watching a guy cut a zombie apart with a chainsaw, and then in the next, we're watching a zombie mourn the death of his wife. This could be used to criticize the attitudes of the characters, but nothing like this happens. Right up until the end, despite literally threatening to drop Queen's head off a building, there's no real character development. No character reflects on how maybe we should just leave the fucking zombies alone. They've been sitting in a swimming pool for 6 years. They're not trying anything. Now, this might be some subtle bullshit that's going right over my fucking head. Maybe we're supposed to infer all this depth from the fucking narrative, but I mean, it doesn't feel that way. Imagine if in Blade Runner 2049, a movie that has similar themes about reflecting on humanity, Agent K just spent the whole movie farting around as a police officer and vaguely related things happened off screen. Then in the final 30 minutes, a big action scene took place and K just happened to be there. I think as a baseline, your characters should have opinions.
How's it feel? Killing your own kind.
I don't retire my own kind because we don't run. Only older models do.
And your new models are happy scraping the shit. Because you've never seen a miracle.
There are some vague moments of sentience amongst the cast, but a lot of it is just throwaway lines. Here's an idea. Have Dave Bautista do his job. Maybe have him act in your movie. I mean, more than the definitely CGI tier, we'll get to that. Wouldn't it be crazy if this Scott guy gave a shit about what was going on? But I guess you just needed the screen time for the comedy Casino Vault Looney Tunes trap bit. Remember what I said about filler in an empty movie? The reason I find it quite weird to call it deep zombie storytelling is because it doesn't do anything. Army of the Dead sets up this theme of zombies feeling human emotions and the moral implications, an interesting question, and then doesn't do anything with it. And it's obvious why. As I mentioned before, the zombies are not characters. They're supposed to be cool. One of the biggest and most noticeable differences between the remake and original Dawn of the Dead is that the once slow zombies are now fast. And at the end of the day, this was most likely chosen because on a surface level, slow zombies are boring while fast zombies are cool and scary. You know, for years I've heard people say, slow zombies are boring, even I could survive those. And listen, I'm sure you could, because you're strong and sexy. This sort of slow zombie discourse has led to the phasing out of slow zombie media, relegated to one of the best comedy films ever made, and 6 out of 10 musicals. Sorry, Anna vs. the Apocalypse really got caught in the crossfire there. On looking at IMDb, like, everyone thinks Anna vs. the Apocalypse is a 6 out of 10. I'm officially a normie. No, I won't accept that. I'll think of a good hot take. Fast Zombies would appear to be a better choice, and some really great zombie movies have come out of it. 28 Days Later is a really great movie. Also, some bad movies have come out of it. Like 28 Weeks Later. Told you I'd think of a better hot take. One fast zombie can overwhelm a whole group if it's given enough plot armor. Those army guys are definitely shooting him. They're also a lot more of a constant threat when compared to their shambling, uncoordinated counterparts. However, they can be very easily mishandled. Within fast zombie media, the plot is usually separated into action or character interaction and development. They can rarely coexist, even in good fast zombie movies. Most scenes in 28 Days Later have to remove zombies for the characters to even have a second to breathe. Unlike in traditional action movies, the enemy are not humans. It wouldn't make sense for them to feel self-preservation, but a lot of the time this high-octane action has an adverse effect on tension. I don't know when Hans Gruber is gonna fucking shoot McClane in the back, and that's a lot more interesting than just very basic running away from zombies and occasionally shooting them, which is usually what these kind of movies often break down into. Speaking of Die Hard, there are scenes in that movie where you can watch McClane process information during action scenes, which is much more difficult when there is no break in the action because the zombies will not stop attacking. As you can probably guess, this lack of a human threat to cause breaks in the action is entirely avoided through the use of slow zombies. They can quickly overwhelm the characters, but even in a moment of heightened stress, the characters still have a chance to communicate beyond minor strategic platitudes.
Come on, man, get out of there! God damn it! Keep up, Steven, just keep up! Don't lock yourself in there!
There is more room for error, and with this increased room for error comes a sense of tension, as one mistake does not mean an instant death. With a zombie movie, you either want horror or action scenes, but the fucking horror scenes of the remake are undercut by some really repetitive and annoying action scenes. Even the fucking zombie baby scene turns into a fucking shootout. As opposed to the original, in the remake, there aren't really any emotionally vulnerable zombie scenes. At least none that stand out as much. Because it's hard to sympathize for a creature that just 5 seconds prior ripped your boyfriend to shreds. Movies like Dawn of the Dead were desperate to modernize an already good concept. While a few of them succeeded, a few of them are 28 Weeks Later. I will never elaborate on why I hate that movie. The desperation for coolness in the remake is also detrimental to the social commentary. In the original, the zombies are already in the shopping center, walking around looking vaguely consumeristic. I assume that's a word.
What are they doing? Why did they come here?
So when the characters assume that the zombies are in the shopping center to act on some consumerist instinct, it makes sense. The remake has a similar line to this.
Why are they coming here?
Memory, maybe. Instinct. Maybe they're coming for us.
But like, it just doesn't work as well. They're not in the shopping center, they're gathering around it while they're throwing fucking bodies off the roof. The political commentary of the original has been stripped back. It's no longer the focal point, and is instead a shallow line, copy and pasted from the original. Hey, remember when Steven said that? Now we have it. We love that movie. We just hate everything that made it good to begin with. Politics. What's politics got to do with zombie movies, am I right? I love when movies say, nothing of substance. Fast zombies are cool. Zombies that can destroy anyone without a second thought are cool. At least they were in 2004. Fast zombies are kind of going out of fashion. Who needs them anymore? What's cooler than a fast zombie? A ninja zombie. The same way the political and emotional nuances of the original film were stripped away by the remake, so too was the political and emotional nuances of Army of the Dead stripped away in favor of looking cool. Zombies that think and feel like humans are cool. Think no further. There are no moral implications to the fact that they can domesticate horses. There's nothing to think about. It's just a movie. This is also incredibly ironic because one of the best action scenes is the first real action set piece, which contains slow zombies. The characters are going through a building with a bunch of zombies that are sleeping. Don't ask me what the fuck that's about.
Don't touch them. I've seen this before. They're hibernating.
And then they all wake up and they start attacking Chambers, who was betrayed by Martin.
Gotcha, bitch.
This very much works because it slowly escalates in intensity and it's very claustrophobic. It establishes Martin as a bad guy and gives us a pretty badass character moment for Chambers. She's like destroying these zombies. It's very John Wick-esque. Of course the action is not as good as John Wick. She like busts through a window at one point and that's just cool. You can tell Martin is panicking because he's thinking she might win. And I love that. This is just a pretty good action scene. It's the best in the whole film. It's got a lot going for it. It's not like a masterpiece of action, but it's definitely good for an action scene to kill off a throwaway character. The handheld camera, which is kind of a burden in other scenes, really shines here. It gives the whole scene a kinetic energy, where instead of feeling like you're watching a quickly and sloppily cut and kind of clunkily choreographed fight scene, it feels like you're watching a fast-paced and hard-hitting fight for survival. It's so baffling that they went out of their way to add these smart zombies, and yet this scene was the most visually interesting. The rest are just kind of boring shooting galleries. This at least has a slight amount of tension. Chambers is surrounded by zombies on all sides. There's also another scene that is conceptually cool, the scene where Van der Rohe fights Zeus. This would be pretty cool in another movie. You know why? Because there's a very similar scene in Predator, the first and only good one. I haven't watched Prey. But at the climax of the movie, Dutch and the Predator have a fist fight. It's cool and gives characterization to the Predator. But it's not like in the movie, the Predator is just hanging out in the jungle and as long as you don't disturb it, it won't kill you. It's very territorial and it actively hunts the characters. Just so you know, this is an analysis of solely the first one. The Predators are expanded on in following movies and they're complete shit. Predator 2 is so fucking awful. I'd have to make like a whole video on how they ruined it. The Predator won't kill unarmed people because they don't really pose a threat. And as is shown in the fist fight scene, they seem to be a very pride-driven creature. It fights Dutch on an equal playing field because that's the honorable thing to do, and that's what makes this movie so amazing. It's not a killing machine like a xenomorph, and it's also not a sad widower whose partner was slaughtered and is now in a grief-driven rage. It's a cool scene because it's in a good movie, not because it's a good idea. Army of the Dead seems more focused on making spectacle, but spectacle without setup is just white noise. The John Wick zombie fight works because the audience doesn't have all this grief baggage that sort of just ruins every scene with Zeus. Zeus isn't an interesting antagonist who you love to hate. It's just really sad, and if that's intentional, then it's still not a good idea. In the original Dawn of the Dead, the power of the zombie horde and the weakness of the individual zombie is directly juxtaposed. One minute they're overwhelming the National Guard, the next they're barely able to function. Characters in this movie feel sympathy for the zombies. Another incredible moment in this movie is when Francine just opens the door for a zombie whose dress is stuck. To no advantage for herself, she does that because she feels sympathy. This is how you make characters feel like people. You make them react to things.
Poet warrior side of Zack that decided to make the Shamblers in that way, that some of us, actors who are charged to play characters taking these zombies off the earth, you would kind of pick up this element of the Shamblers that makes you feel bad for them.
This is the closest thing to respect a character gives to a zombie, except stabbing them through the head. I'm not going to praise you for having a sad zombie because none of the goddamn characters take a stance. Also, I lied earlier, the remake does have one good zombie sympathy scene. The scene where Andy, who's slowly turning into a zombie, lifts up a sign covered in blood is a genuinely haunting moment. It would be a standout moment even in a good movie. The thing about the remake is it just covers up its shittiness by being a competently told story, a crutch that unfortunately Army of the Dead does not have. In 28 Days Later, when Selena, a character that has lived in the zombie apocalypse for 28 days, if you couldn't infer, realizes her friend Mark got bit. Her response to this is to instantly go for the fucker's jugular. You can obviously tell she's been severely fucked up by the zombie apocalypse. She's become so emotionally detached that she can just kill without remorse. It's not like she's a bad person. Depending on how you see it, she may not have even done anything wrong, but it's part of her character arc to realize that living without any earthly attachments isn't living. A good movie will be able to scrutinize its characters and their impact on the world of the film. Army of the Dead sets up a lot of interesting themes. The first 30 minutes of this movie is honestly pretty good and is an insight into how great this film could have been if they followed through with any idea. Take this for example. Scott killed his wife. Scott killing his wife is possibly the funniest scene in the whole movie, and that's saying a lot for a movie where a woman is crushed to death by a shipping container. It's really clunky. He stabs his zombie wife through the head with a knife. Like, he dropped his gun? Why didn't he just use that? Seems a lot more impersonal than getting her... It seems a lot more impersonal than getting her in a chokehold and slowly... Fuck, it's a funny scene. He fucking slowly stabs his wife through the head. He starts crying at one point, and I mentioned this earlier, but I'm like 99% sure that's a CGI tear. I've watched this movie like 5 times, and this scene is always funny. Like, Kate walks out of her bedroom and screams, "Mom!" We're not 5 years old. We know what a fucking mother is. But for the first hour, we're led to believe Kate is angry because Scott killed her mother.
I know this is not going to make up for what I did, or what type of father I was.
Yeah.
With $15 million, you can help these people. You can go back to school and do whatever you want. Whatever you do with this money, I know will be the right thing.
But it turns out the real reason is because Scott didn't talk to her following the death.
It's not the fact that you killed my mother. It's that you never showed up after, okay? You weren't there.
So Kate, a fully grown woman, is upset because her father didn't talk to her on account of having to stab his wife through the head with a combat knife. It's even suggested that he did try and reach out to her, and she just ignored him.
And then when I tried to come back around, it seemed like you didn't want me there, so I assumed you should just stay gone.
I mean, maybe if it was 6 years, I would be a bit more understanding, because then the plot of the movie would be Scott, after half a decade, jumped back into her life and offered her $15 million in American currency. Now this is either very bad writing or mediocre editing. How can you write a scene like Kate being forced to kill her infected father and not have their main conflict be that she resents him for killing her mother? It doesn't make sense. The whole thing lacks a coherent through line, a problem we'll cover later, and ruins any semblance of meaning we can gather from the past 2.5 hours. Now, I don't know the motives behind this choice, but I hope you will agree, this feels malicious. The movie goes out of its way to acknowledge these creatures' sentience and emotions, and yet still devalues their lives. One of the best scenes in the original Dawn of the Dead comes right at the end. The shopping center is raided by a bunch of bikers who start wrecking shit.
This last one's gonna be called consumerism.
Hey man, what the hell you gonna watch on that thing?
Oh, man.
Oh, look, consumerism. Oh, I want a new iPad, Mom. I want a new iPad, Mommy.
Suddenly the raiders start throwing pies in the zombies' faces. I don't know what you guys think, But this is kind of a risky move. A scene where the main threat of the movie gets pies thrown in their faces, and what's really impressive is it still works. It doesn't take away from the horror of the movie's zombies. The horror of becoming a zombie is still clear. They're being disrespected even in death. This movie balances the horrific and pitiful elements of the Zombinis perfectly. This pie scene exemplifies the careful balance at play, because right after this, the raiders get swarmed by the creatures they were previously mocking. Army of the Dead can play as much sad music as it wants over a scene of Zeus mourning. The movie just doesn't make me feel sad for the zombies. It isn't able to create sympathy because it isn't even trying, which feels like a huge missed opportunity. A scene like the pie scene is great as sort of a play on expectations, while the zombie boxing scene isn't, because Dawn of the Dead worked to create a sympathy for these creatures that Army of the Dead just didn't. Now, I don't think, in isolation, Scott and Kate's heart-to-heart is bad writing, and not just because the movie is kind of supposed to be tragic, but really doesn't lean into making it so. I don't think it's bad writing because it seems like a remnant of some rewrite. Particularly the strange amount of war metaphors and imagery littering the first 30 minutes of this movie. And I don't mean the actual military that's in the movie. Before any of you fucking smartasses comment that. Army of the Dead is good at setting stuff up. At the beginning, Vandero, my favorite character. Actually, that's not accurate. My favorite character is Dieter.
Watch your fingers, Mr. Big Hand.
But he's a comic relief who doesn't really get much fleshed out characterization until his spin-off movie.
Ludwig Dieter, we've been watching you.
That's a real thing. I love cinematic universes. It's also a bad movie, but for like completely different reasons. They made it a fucking comedy. In my opinion, Dieter works far more effectively in this sort of overdramatic tragedy setting as opposed to a... Well, it's a Ghostbusters 2016 level comedy.
Do we say something? No. Too much time has gone by. It's weird now. Should we just leave and then knock? How about when he comes back in, he yells surprise? That seems like a terrible, terrible idea. Surprise!
I might make a short video about it if there's interest. It's just not very funny. I mean, it looks good. It wasn't directed by Zack Snyder, so that's why you can see more than 30% of each shot. Vandero, my favorite character. Sorry, I went on a whole rant there. I don't know why I put that in the script. And don't think this is a moment of ad-libbed self-reflection. This is also in the script. Doe! Fuck, how do you fuck up a Homer Simpson impression? Vandero is introduced as having a job helping the elderly. The good thing about this movie being set after the initial breakout is the characters have had time to process their emotions, a story beat usually relegated to boring melodramas that sounded good on paper. I'm just subtweeting movies all over the place. The characters having processed their emotions can manifest in a way like the boring drama between Kate and Scott, or in a slightly more engaging way like Vandero's grief.
You know, when we were in it, like, when we were really in it, I never thought about the faces of all the countless monsters, but now just realized, you know, we're people. But now their faces, that's all I see. So I don't know if being back in would be better or worse, God. I can't figure that out, but I guess there is a chance that it could be cathartic.
I think it's interesting to have a character who feels like this. Vandero probably stood out the most in the intro. I mean, it's hard to ignore a guy who fucking cut zombies in half with a chainsaw, so for him to have such a major character change in those 6 years creates interesting drama. In the first 30 minutes of the movie, Vegas serves as a metaphor for warfare. It's not very subtle. There's literally wartime refugees as a major plot thing. Calling it a plot point would imply that there was some purpose behind their inclusion. The characters were thrust into combat and came out the other side completely changed. Vandero is racked with guilt and Scott basically has PTSD. There's also characters like Mikey who are drawn into this romanticized view of combat. He's detached his feelings for killing these zombies, which were once human beings, by viewing it like a game. He's getting kill streaks. He has Reddit forums dedicated to him.
It's crazy.
There are Reddit forums devoted to this guy.
They're called a subreddit, boomer. The confrontation between Kate and Scott always seemed like projection, right? She thinks I'm a monster, a mother-murdering monster. Then he realizes she wasn't mad about that. I thought that could serve as some sort of realization for Scott. He doesn't feel bad because his daughter thinks that. He's upset because he thinks that. He thinks he's a mother-murdering monster. Or in this case, a wife-wasting werewolf. There's not a lot of synonyms for murdering or monster that begin with a W. A significant other slaughtering slug. There's another one. That was a bad joke. The reason I like the first 30 to 40 minutes of this movie is because it sets up interesting plot points and themes. While not all the characters are well written, Scott and Vanderohe stand out. These are men scarred by combat, desperate to return to some form of normalcy, but just can't move past their experiences. But once Vanderohe returns to Vegas, he just sort of melts into the background. He doesn't grapple with any feelings, he doesn't even comment anything similar to his earlier sentiment.
I got the bride. I got the bride. I shot her 3 times.
Actually, it was 4.
Maybe you think it's stupid to consider the morality of killing zombies, but even if you think this, you have to agree, setting up this character trait and never mention it again is just bad writing. This is not a small problem. This is not a hole in the script regarding fucking rain. This is one of the main characters of your fucking movie just losing their only established character trait and it never being brought back up. There's no through line. All the characters die. I mean, what's that even supposed to mean? What does it signify? None of the characters really learn any lessons. None of them have any harsh realizations beyond, I'm not angry at you for killing my mother. It's all meaningless shite. I guess it could be called a tragedy in some way, but it's missing what makes a great tragedy. Fatal flaws. Interesting character drama. The feeling that this was in some way the fault of all the characters. Good writing. That's also important, but more in a general sense. I can gush about how interesting a lot of these themes are, and I will continue to, you can't stop me. But the reason I enjoy movies is because the interesting themes are part of the story, and not just what amounts to filler. Imagine if 28 Days Later had the scene of Selena killing Mark, and then she just died without really resolving any of her baggage. That would be a bad movie, and I should know, because that movie is called 28 Weeks Later. Now you understand why I hate that movie. They killed off the one interesting character who actually had room to develop and left us with fucking Jeremy Renner. Army of the Dead has a pretty compelling concept if you're a lore nerd, or a nerd for themes and imagery. What if zombies were humans? Would it be alright to just kill them? What would be the moral implications? It's also pretty horrifying, the idea that when you get bit by a zombie, instead of turning into a mindless husk, a whole different personality manifests. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's a compelling question, but doesn't do anything with the damn question. It feels like an unironic Starship Troopers. The nuke is a PR stunt by an overly patriotic president.
To exterminate Las Vegas's undead population by taking the extreme action of dropping a low-yield tactical nuclear bomb on the city of Las Vegas in 4 days' time, coinciding with sunset on the 4th of July holiday.
I haven't explained the plot to this movie yet. I just realized that. Okay, they're gonna nuke Vegas. The United States government are going to nuke Vegas because there's a bunch of zombies in it. I probably should have said that before we were over halfway through the video. I forgot. I should probably explain a bit more. Because of this nuke, a casino owner, Tanaka? I think that's his name? It is. Tanaka wants Scott to rob his Vegas casino, but it's actually a cover-up because he's working with the United States government.
You know how much a whole head of one of these things is worth? To my boss, to the government?
It doesn't make much sense because, you know, it's a bad movie. The government wants a blood sample so they can make zombie super soldiers.
This is the power to make more of them. Power to control your own zombie army. That's the ultimate WMD.
Now, you would think Tanaka would still want his 100 million American currency cut, but he doesn't? Like, Martin betrays the gang, even though only the Coyote knows about his evil plan.
Tanaka doesn't give a shit about the money. What's in this bag? It's worth 10 times what's in that vault.
And why did they send a bunch of effectively civilians into Vegas? You have the military backing you. Why does the government need a middleman? Why is the casino a factor in this plan? Judging by how the characters act, I don't think they would give a shit if the plan was just getting a blood sample. None of it makes sense, and it's so painfully obvious it's baffling they didn't notice in the first draft. This is not the characters making small logical mistakes like in a horror movie. This is the main plot of your movie just not making sense on even a conceptual level. The movie is rather on the nose with its commentary. And also it's not funny, but to each to their own.
The president caved to the pressures to move the date of the bombing off of the holiday. This marked a reversal of his earlier position that dropping the nuke on the 4th would be, quote, really cool, and the ultimate fireworks show, and, quote, actually kind of patriotic if you think about it.
Do people think this is compelling political commentary? Or even political satire? Like, why make a movie if you're going to have SNL level writing and delivery?
As history shows us, nothing brings two countries together like a wall.
Well, I told you, and
I think maybe videos such as my Mr. Iglesias review can make it seem like I hate unsubtle political commentary, when I kind of love unsubtle political commentary. Glass Onion is probably one of the least subtle movies I've watched in years, and that movie is fucking great.
Miles Braun is an idiot.
Oh, please. Because it's not trying to hide anything. And yeah, being funny really appeals to me. It's more poorly written and unsubtle writing that kind of annoys me. That's why I don't like the first 30 minutes of Glass Onion. Once they get into the actual mystery, it's much better. You know, so much media is so obnoxious about its unsubtlety. Like, dude, you're not writing the next great American novel, you're making a poopy funny haha sitcom. Own it. Get over yourself. On that note, yeah, this movie is sort of awful at political commentary.
You have no idea what I've seen in those camps, what those people have to do to survive. At least within these walls, the rules are clear. You don't see them fucking each other over. Compris?
Wow, that's great. Who wrote that one? I'd like to know so I can congratulate them. Although, if you want to make her message a little more clear, because some people are literal morons, you could have her look right into the camera. I feel like that would improve the social commentary.
What's everybody looking at me for?
It's a free country. People can look at whoever they want.
Actually, it's not a free country. We're not in America anymore, haven't you heard?
Which technically makes it an even freer country, right?
Okay, alright, Jesus Christ, I get it. Can you actually try something creative with these ideas? I mean, you can do the theme of greed pretty well. See, this shot's good. It conveys something through visuals. I don't need this hand-holding horse shit to watch a movie. Movies should challenge their audience to think with their brain holes. That's like the best part of art. They don't have someone in the scene go, hey, you don't see the zombies chasing wealth only to inevitably die for their greed. Oh wait, they do. The clip I just fucking showed you.
You don't see them fucking each other over.
You water down a very simple message that is perfectly coherent in visual form. For what reason? To make it more digestible? It's not more digestible for me, at least. It's annoying. Commentary should appear through the narrative. If you've done your job properly, then this bullshit wouldn't be so jarring. I love the original Dawn of the Dead because of its use of news as a plot point. The movie opens in a news station with a talk show host and a scientist discussing the approach the government is taking to the zombie outbreak.
Should we be unable to check the spread because of the emotional attitudes of the citizenry toward these issues of morality? Citizens may no longer occupy private residences, no matter how safely protected or well-stocked.
The scientist is talking about the National Guard doing police raids, and he explicitly puts faith in these police raids.
The bodies of the dead will be delivered over to specially equipped squads of the National Guard for organized disposition.
Following this, we cut to one of those police raids where an officer called Wooly is indiscriminately running and gunning through rooms. Whether they're zombies or not, he's just gunning them down. This is good political commentary. The scientist's speech is directly contradicted by this scene. The scientist, intentionally or not, is pushing government propaganda. It's both a criticism of government suppression and the mainstream media's tendency to pledge unquestioning faith in a government that's first reaction to civil disorder is to suppress it by shooting people in the face. Now returning to fucking Army of the Dead, guess how they use news? In a debate between some guy and some woman about fucking refugee camps, the woman says people are being held as political prisoners and threatened with the prospect of a guard lying about them being infected to curb dissent.
They would be zombies already. They're political prisoners. Just, you know as well as I do, if you have questionable immigration status, advocate for gay rights or abortion, the next thing you know, they have a temperature gun at your head or dragging you out of your house or your car under the guise of public safety.
Then in the literal next scene, Geeta considers going back into Vegas to get some money because they're being held as political prisoners.
That money is a ticket out of here, or we'll be trapped in Barstow forever. Listen, these guards, they don't give a shit. But for $5,000, I can buy my way out.
And then a guard threatens to say Kate is infected to curb her dissent.
You know, the first sign of infection is belligerence and actions outside of social norms. Clear. Oh. You're down a couple of decimal points. You sure you're feeling all right? Sure you're not infected?
I'm fine.
You're both within the margin of error. But watch it.
Mr. Snyder, respectfully, I know you watched Dawn of the Dead. You made a fucking remake of it. So why did you do this? This is obnoxiously unsubtle. What could possibly be the thought process behind having a character explain what a scene means before the actual scene takes place? It's fucking baffling. Frankly, you're making art, not running for president? I don't give a shit about your political opinion unless you say it in an interesting way. Am I glad that Zack Snyder has realized that eugenics propaganda isn't the best use of his artistic talent? Yes, I am, but at least 300 was subtle enough for some people in the audience to maybe flinch at me calling it eugenics propaganda. Dawn of the Dead's commentary isn't directly told to the audience, and that's what makes this movie a far more politically and thematically coherent product compared to Army of the Dead. Not only that, but a majority of the people being shot by Wooly are minorities. Geez, I wonder if this movie is trying to say something. A bunch of police raining hell on a minority community using political turmoil as a cover-up? Oh, I wonder what this fucking movie's trying to say.
Come on, Martinez.
Yeah, come on, Martinez. Show your greasy little Puerto Rican ass so I can blow it right off. Blow all their asses off, low-life bastards. Blow all their low-life little Puerto Rican and nigger asses right off.
Better ignore that when I make a remake, you fucking hack. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. I think I've been holding back a lot of my emotions during this video. Mr. Snyder, again respectfully, this story fucking sucks. It's just lacking something in the intriguing character interactions department. As soon as the characters get to the casino, they are relegated to duos. Sometimes there's a third wheel, but it's mainly duos. Except Maria, who would have likely interacted more with Marion. Except Marion spends a majority of the movie alone because she was green screened into this movie to replace a rapist. Legally, I have to say it was allegations, but it was probably a good idea to get rid of them.
What the hell is this? Spend all his money on that fucking miniature?
It's not like she does a bad job, because that's the funniest line in the whole movie, but she also has the worst line in the movie, so it kind of balances it out.
I know, somewhere between leaving your ass and saving my own. I developed a conscience.
just fucking awful delivery on that. Remember that thing I said about subtlety? And it's also just a useless misdirect that creates an unneeded 5 seconds of tension. Honestly, they probably should have just cast her to begin with. Tig Notaro is a surprisingly competent actress, and I wish I could have seen more of her in this movie. Because of this approach to character interaction, conflict is incredibly safe and contrived. When characters do break their established group, it's mainly to argue. Take the conflict between Kate and the Coyote.
What did you do? What do you mean? Ah! You took her in! You took in Kita! Yeah, I took her in. Her and 2 others. I took a lot of people in.
There's no way Kita's alive, right? I mean, look at these things.
I brought a guy in once, lost sight of him, had to leave him. I thought he was dead. Then 3 days later, he came walking back out.
So that's a pretty common theme for you? Leaving people behind?
The 2 times this conflict is brought up, it ends the same way. The Coyote says some variation of, I do what I must to help these people.
They need that money to get out of here. You know that.
She didn't come back.
Well, not everyone does. They know the risks.
She has 2 kids!
Listen, if I knew she had kids, I wouldn't have taken her. Do you think I enjoy having to leave people? I'm doing what I can to make things right.
And then Kate looks kind of dejected. I wonder why this movie is 2.5 hours long. Maybe it's because they put practically the same scene twice. The conflict is never really expanded on, and of course, in the end, they all die, so it will never really be expanded on. The one justification I could hear for it is that it establishes in Kate's mind that Gita may be held in one of the Olympus's rooms, but then it's just clunky dialogue, which isn't much better. And then there's the huge plot hole that is the money. Scott says he's keeping 45 million of the 50 million for family and friends. He's giving Vandero, Maria, and Kate 15 million each. The rest get divided from 5 million.
Figure you, me, and Vander will take 15 million each, assuming he'll do it. Everybody else who isn't family.
Nobody needs to know our cut.
This is the perfect setup for conflict. While I'm not a fan of the second act lie revealed trope, it's kind of an animated children's movie thing, but anything to break the monotony of this fucking god-awful narrative would be welcome. This money is never brought up again. There's never a conflict surrounding these inconsistent cuts. Dieter gets the least, even though he's arguably the most important member of the team. He's the one cracking the safe, and this is pointed out by the movie.
How would you like to make 250 grand for 1 day's work?
Well, I mean, obviously the German is the most important person because he can open the safe, but barring that, it's gotta be me, right?
Why is the money a plot point? Why is it expressly stated to the audience that Scott is effectively scamming these people out of a fair cut? While I'm sure at some point in the 14 years of rewrites this was an important plot point, it just kind of serves to poison the well on a character that isn't particularly self-serving. While you could argue this was some attempt to characterize Scott or some commentary on greed, I mean, he does say he wants to do something just for them.
Everything we did, all those people we saved. Look what it got us. Now what if just once, we did something just for us?
But like, the movie's already so devoid of content, it's all just boring action set pieces. It really wouldn't go amiss with some kind of conflict that actually gets explored in more than 2 interactions. This is supposed to be a kind of ensemble movie. That's what heist movies are usually about. And so to practically ignore the character aspects a large group setting entails and focus on these more intimate stories seems like kind of a hit and a miss. While more intimate father-daughter stories have their place, of course, it just seems kind of pointless to have this huge cast of characters surrounding what should have been a smaller cast, preferably what should have been a father-daughter story of escaping Vegas after the death of the mother at the father's hand. Imagine how cool that would have been. Can't do it now, unless you want to ruin this movie even more. I don't want to act like I know better than the guy with a bunch of experience in the field, but come on, you spend all this time on unsubtle political commentary and monologues about time loops, but just ignore any kind of interesting character drama? On top of the lack of actual character interaction making the movie boring, it also just makes a lot of plot points actively less impactful. When Martin betrays the gang, the last and effectively only person he talks to is the coyote. She's the only fucking person who knows what the fuck is going on.
Martin, let us out of here.
Oh my god, I got you twice. I got you twice. Slow learner. I'm gonna go kill that dumbass pilot.
Now that she's fixed the chopper, fly myself out of here.
This choice to have characters very rarely break their established groups leaves this big fucking gaping hole in the narrative where nobody tangibly reacts to Martin leaving. It lacks any dramatic weight because, other than the coyote, nobody knows who the fuck this goddamn guy is. At least there's a robot zombie in this scene. That makes up for your movie's lack of anything interesting happening. You know, in the original Dawn of the Dead, when Roger died, the characters actually mourned for him. They began taking on the consumerist traits as a way to cope, framed and blocked as tiny and lost within extreme long shots. The shopping centre somehow seeming darker than the sterile whites should allow. In this movie, when a character dies, Mikey pulls a sad face, and then she's forgotten about because nobody has spoken to each other or formed relationships. Or Scott kind of screams when, like, Maria dies. Even though they haven't really shared much screen time. I guess they're like brother and sister, but we haven't really seen, we've seen like, there's like one scene. Probably would have been impactful if we had known this character. So yeah, it's a bad zombie movie. And also just a bad movie, but at least the heist part is good, right? Right?
Right after dawn, I kind of had this idea for this zombie heist movie in Las Vegas.
The ultimate heist is to go into Vegas where there's tons of money, but what if it wasn't the police? What if it was zombies that you had to face?
What's the deal with the plan in this movie? Sorry, that was the best transition I could come up with. Let me explain the plan for this 150 million American currency heist. Kill zombies outside the casino, go inside, kill zombies inside, go to vault, trigger traps, and then use a very rudimentary safe cracking technique to open the vault.
Whatever zombies are still walking should be no problem for a gang of tough hombres such as yourselves. You reach the casino in less than 2 hours. You go in and find the generators. There you'll find several non-lethal deterrents. You'll have to find a way to trigger them. Back at the main door, our safe cracker gets to work.
You know how they crack the vault? Dieter puts his fucking ear up to it and listens for the locks quietly clicking. There's 2 problems with that. One, it definitely would not work. But I don't really care. I could suspend my disbelief. But more importantly, that is so fucking boring. You have a theoretically infinite amount of methods to get a vault open, and you pick putting your fucking ear up to it? Army of Thieves at least has these little animated CG shots going through the safe locks. While this movie definitely doesn't have some reverence for the art of locksmithing and cracking, that makes me sound like a fucking nerd, at least it's aware that close-up shots of someone's face is a really boring way to make this fucking scene. They use an abundance of movement that makes the scene feel a lot more energetic. Army of the Dead, on the other hand, is very much missing the kinetic energy that I think it wanted to make up for through its use of handheld, but it falls flat and becomes very unengaging because of its generally very awkward filming style. Please focus the fucking camera. Could the writing team not come up with a more interesting plan? Their escape plan is going up to the roof and getting into a fucking helicopter. What a shit plan. Think about a heist movie like Ocean's 11. They have very elaborate plans with a bunch of moving parts, and this is not a random choice, it's to make the movie more interesting. The same with a heist movie like Reservoir Dogs. It only shows the before and after of the botched heist. You wanna know why? Because it would be fucking boring. Also probably for budgetary reasons, but shut the fuck up, I wanna trick myself into believing it was on purpose. Cut out the zombies from Army of the Dead, and what do you get? Get inside, crack the safe, leave in a fucking helicopter. They were really banking on the zombies just carrying this fucking movie. You could very easily replace the zombies with police. Walk in, shoot the fucking police, get in a helicopter on the roof. It's not that different. So why make it explicitly a heist movie? Maybe it could have been about Vegas refugees robbing casinos. You could have had the safe just organically show up. They get greedy and decide to try and crack the safe. This would result in the political commentary, you know, actually fucking making sense and having a purpose in the movie. Or you could have a zombie horde already in the casino. You have those shamblers or whatever the fuck they're called. Have the characters navigate the casino while distracting the zombies with noisy slot machines. Maybe have one of them get a jackpot and a character gets greedy and tries to take some, and then it gets killed or some shit. I don't fucking know. And seeing as the zombies are dead people, you could have had like staff key cards, which one of the zombies have, but you gotta separate it from the rest of the horde to get it. Just add even a slight amount of tension to this fucking movie. The thing is, this movie is 2.5 hours long. You should expect some kind of weight to a story like that. I know this might be a hot take, but if you're gonna make me sit through 2.5 hours, you better give me a Battle of Helm's Deep, or the baptism scene from The Godfather. I want weight, I want tension, I want substance, I'm a little baby, me want action. What I don't want is these stupid fucking shooting galleries of zombies. It's stupid. Nothing coalesces. You're making me dedicate a huge chunk of my day to this movie for what amounts to insubstantial schlock, which doesn't work when you're obviously trying to tell some pretentious Shakespearean tragedy about fucking time loops or some shit, I don't know. And of course, I'm not saying a 2.5 hour long, like, character study should have a Helm's Deep, but you should at least have like a taxi driver apartment shootout, or the test result scene from The Farewell. I know these movies aren't 2.5 hours long, but I like them, so I'm going to mention them. If you're going to make me watch through a movie, there should be one big scene that sort of encapsulates the whole thing. The climax, when the zombies break into the casino, is like 25 minutes long, and it doesn't justify that length whatsoever. The most interesting thing that happens is the tiger kills one person, and Zeus jumps into a helicopter. The worst part is that Zeus's rage is entirely misdirected. It was Martin, and Martin alone, that killed Queen. Sure, the coyote was there, but unless she was going to shoot Martin and then try to explain what she was even doing outside the casino with him, she didn't have much of a choice in the matter. The finale doesn't feel earned because none of the main characters made any real decisions. If we go back to Predator, Dutch wanted to fight the Predator. He made a conscious decision to engage with it. In Army of the Dead, Zeus has neither met nor has any knowledge of Vandero. I'm telling you, it's just a bunch of fucking white noise. This video has, ironically, been in a kind of development hell for over 2.5 years. The reason I've had to rewrite this script like 5 times is because Army of the Dead is kind of a holistically bad movie. A lot of the problems with it seem interconnected. Nothing works, and the reason nothing works is because everything surrounding it doesn't work. I think all that changed with the release of Everything Everywhere All at Once and The Suicide Squad. I know that sounds weird, but I'll explain. First, The Suicide Squad. Now, The Suicide Squad is the best DC Cinematic Universe movie. Somehow they were able to pull a great movie out of their ass, which is shocking, especially for a sequel to their second worst movie. Their first, of course, being the original cut of Justice League.
He's confused, he doesn't know who he is.
Pet Cemetery.
Which I think I can safely say is probably the worst movie I've seen in my life. The Suicide Squad is Army of the Dead. They're the same movie. The Suicide Squad is an ensemble movie about a mind-controlling virus that secretly has a dark backstory and is more human than you would expect. The American government is tied up not only in its creation, but in its cover-up, while also wishing to use the mind control virus for warfare. The main character has father-daughter relationship troubles, the task of the government is completed with the help of an overly patriotic backstabber, and the best character is a comic relief character that the second they get a redeemingly brave moment, they die. Now, I'm not claiming anything. Claiming plagiarism is unfalsifiable, although James Gunn both made The Suicide Squad and wrote the remake of Dawn of the Dead. so I don't really know what to say about that. But unlike Army of the Dead, The Suicide Squad is an emotionally raw movie. These irredeemable characters can still be viewed through an empathetic lens. The main villain was experimented on by humans, much like Zeus, but unlike Zeus, Starro's death feels both tragic but necessary.
I was happy, floating, staring at the stars.
While the same can be said of Zeus, it isn't nearly as well communicated as it is in The Suicide Squad. The final sequence is really moving, and all of its themes coalesce.
Why rats, Papa?
Rats are the lowliest and most despised of all creatures, my love. They have purpose. So do we all.
That's my dad. Because of That's my dad.
I love The Suicide Squad. It's a surprisingly good movie. Like the other cinematic universe movies of James Gunn, Guardians of the Galaxy, it is the only reason I won't say these cinematic universes don't really have to exist. Listen, if you wiped every DCEU and MCU movie off the face of the earth except these 4 movies, cinematic literacy around the world would increase tenfold. And listen, I'm not gonna pander to a bunch of fucking idiots. I'm so cool, I pretend I'm too good for Marvel movies. Then there's Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is an incredible movie. If you haven't watched it, you're probably not a real human being. It's a big movie. It actually has higher stakes than Army of the Dead. It deals with what is assumed to be a villain that will destroy every universe in every dimension. But it handles familial relationships with such maturity, beauty, and intimacy that it might as well be called a family drama as opposed to an action movie.
尽管离家让我心碎，我想告诉你，如果有来生，我还是会选择和你一起报税，开心一点。
It's the kind of movie where you could look up a clip on YouTube and get so engrossed in it that you start crying your eyes out. I would assume that's something that could happen. Everything Everywhere All at Once is so good at handling a huge plot about little things that Army of the Dead pales in comparison. Where the action of Army of the Dead is divorced from the father-daughter plot, the action and themes of Everything Everywhere All at Once are intertwined. You can have this intimate story along with the big stakes of an action movie, but not like in Army of the Dead. There is no real coherence. It feels too big, too large in scope to justify these intimate scenes. The treatment of grief-ridden zombies lessens the impact of Scott and Kate's relationship, because if the movie doesn't treat the zombies with reverence, why should we care about its characters? The focus on zombies being cool ninjas entirely removes what could have been a more intimate family drama where a father and daughter reconcile, and it's because they're too focused on trying not to die by these unstoppable killing machines. There's only like 6 zombies in the casino, because otherwise they couldn't give the characters any room to breathe. The lack of empathy for zombies, the constant establishing of plot points without through lines, the unsubtle, annoying political commentary, the lack of character relationships, and an interesting heist all serve to make not only a bloated, unfocused mess of a movie, but also, put simply, a bad movie.